Live from San Antonio, it's Cashflow Mike, right? And we're doing Cashflow Mastery Talks with Insightful Accountant. It is a once a month event that I host with Insightful Accountant where we talk about cash flow issues and cash flow related things. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things, and that's inventory. So it's going to be kind of interesting, right? So if you notice, I'm kind of going through a lot of different cash flow scenarios. We haven't even touched forecasting yet. So think about that. I always think about forecasting as the thing that just tells you where the problem is or tells you where it's coming from. It doesn't tell you how to make it go away or make it stop or make it change. So everybody thinks of cash flow as just that, and it's a lot more. One of the cool things about this Provo event, GrowCon, is I got to roll out some new material. So those of you who don't know, I do have a new book out there called "Don't Tell Me What to Do," and it's all about terminating the long lecture, how to have conversation with your clients and get them to take action. So that's something I rolled out. Some new stuff, a new presentation, kind of like the 7-minute conversation, but I rolled that out this week. So if everybody's here, or at least a lot of people's here, let's kind of get started. I'm going to go ahead and get started with what we're doing. So, all right. So today, Cashflow Mastery Talks is our monthly webinar. We're going to be talking about inventory management techniques and about minimizing the cost to hold your inventory. So why am I doing this, right? Why do I come every month to do this? Well, I'm on a mission to eliminate cash flow as the reason that businesses fail, right? That's my whole mission in life right now. I want you to fail for other reasons. Your product isn't great, whatever that is, but I don't want you to fail because you run out of money, right? There's other reasons that you can fail, and that's not one of them. Now, the reason why, here's the thing. Before COVID, this number, 18,000 business bankruptcy filings, was up to 50,000, right? So it's actually come down post-COVID. People are starting to pay more attention to cash flow, and this is the positive sign, but 18,000 is still too many. It doesn't seem like a lot, but that's 18,000 people that failed because they ran out of money. What's important about that is that 35% of these were totally preventable because they were making money on paper, just didn't have it in their bank account. So think about that. The trend is down, but hey, filings are starting to pop up again, and the average right now is about 18,000. So what is this? What is this inventory thing? So I tell you, I was in Wasilla, Alaska. Let me tell you about just money in inventory. Wasilla, Alaska. If you haven't been there, somebody told me you could see Russia from there. That's one of the things that was a joke in the past if you're political that way. But I was working with a tire dealership, right? And if you've ever been to a tire company or a tire dealership or went in there and bought tires, got your oil change, those type of things, they're all set up the same. They're all set up with kind of an office area, a waiting area off to one side. Usually it's off to the left side, the ones I see anyway. Then they have all these bays, 3, 4, 5 bays across the front. And then they've got a warehouse in the back. Well, usually in the little warehouse in the back is where they keep the tires. And here's my experience with business owners. They love inventory. They love to show you inventory. They want to take you on a tour and walk the warehouse. They want to show you how much they actually have. So in my mind, this doesn't happen in real life, but in my mind, every time a business owner opens their warehouse door, it's like they go, oh, and a big glow comes out of it, right? They're just so proud of what they've done and what they have. And they always want to show you. Well, I'm not big on tires, right? They're just not one of the things that I get really excited about. I've seen a bunch of tires on the shelf. But there was a set that actually caught my attention. It actually made me look and think about it a little bit more. And it was these tires, and they were wider than me, wider than I can move my hands out, right? They were wider than that. And they were taller than me too. So think about it. I'm 6 foot tall. It's one of those things that the tires were taller than me. They were wider than me. I said, oh my God, how much do those cost? The owner looks at me and says, those are $3,500 tires. I said, really? I said, well, what do you charge for them? He says, well, we actually mark it up 100%. So I get $7,000 a tire on it. And I said, you're kidding me. I said, how many of those do you sell a month? He says, 2, maybe 3 a month, right? Because he's up in Wasilla. They got these big, snow movers and things like that up there. So I'm sitting there counting. I'm like going 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 16 of these tires. Well, 16 times 35, we're upwards of $50,000 now in tires sitting on the shelf. If you've ever heard me before, I always compare, well, inventory to that little, doll, that elf that people move around their house during Christmas time, right? So it's kind of a kid's game where it looks like the elf is actually running around the house causing all kinds of mischief, and the kid wakes up and it's in a different spot. And what did the elf do last night? And they call it Elf on the Shelf, right? So if you've ever seen that, most people don't want that little elf running around their house because A, it's causing all this mischief, but B, it's a lot of work for the parents, right? Every night they got to come up with a cool new idea to go out there and create a scenario for this for the child. Well, I call inventory now wealth on the shelf because it's the same thing. Just like you don't want an elf on the shelf, you don't want wealth on the shelf either. So I'm thinking there's $50,000. He only sells two or three a month. So the next question logically to me is, well, how long does it take you to get them, right? Because he may have 16 of them because it takes 6 months to get these things, right? So he has to have them on the shelf or not. So he says, oh, I can get them in about 3 weeks. I said, 3 weeks? I said, why do you have 16? He says, because I'm the only one in town that sells this type of tire, and I want to have it in case there's a run on them. But he's only ever sold two or three a month. Well, there's generally probably not going to be a run on them, right? So no sense to keep 16 when you only sell two or three. And if you know anything about tires, there's petroleum, kind of an oil that's into the rubber. And as these tires move around, so does the oil, right? That's what keeps your tires pliable and viable on the roadway, is that they got this petroleum that kind of moves through them. Other than that, you've seen tires that just sit and don't get exercise and don't have the weight on them and they're not moving. Well, those tend to dry rot, right? So it's not good to have these tires sitting on the shelf doing nothing for a long amount of time. Well, in his case, based on the calculation I'm going to show you today, he should have only had maybe 4 tires. That's a difference of $35,000 just holding the right amount of inventory. And most of your clients right now today don't know what the right amount of inventory to have is. And I'm not talking about the big number, that all the SKUs together. I'm talking about the little number, the each individual SKU that you have that actually just sucks money out of your company in the form of just inventory purchases. So these are the things that kind of take up the biggest mistakes, right? I order too much because I don't know how much to order. I don't know how long it takes. And these were the two, the seasonal trends and the underestimating lead times. That was the thing during COVID that caused a bunch of problems in the supply chain, is that lead times went from a week or 2 weeks where I could get these things every 2 weeks to it was taking a month and a half or 2 months. And it changed the whole ordering cycle during that period. And we got supplier management where we're not, we're letting people just push goods onto us. You got to remember, if they come in and offer you a discount, and it happened to me in the bars, I used to run bar restaurants. If they come and offer you a discount, like going buy one, get one free, what the business owner thinks is, oh, I'm getting some free stuff so I can make a lot of money on that extra inventory. And really what's happened is the supplier has pushed their inventory problem to your shelf, right? That's what they've done, is they've just moved it off theirs. If you bought one, and it's usually something you don't buy anyway, like cotton candy vodka, and Kathy will tell you, she's heard me tell this story plenty of times. That's how you end up with, uh, you know, that's how you end up with too much cotton candy vodka. And the only way to get rid of it, because nobody's buying it, the only way to get rid of it is throw a party at your house. I'll tell you that. So you're just going to buy cotton candy vodka for yourself if you do it that way. So you're not doing your forecasting, how much you need, lack of technology, those type of things, ignoring carrying cost. And carrying cost are those things that are hidden in your operating expense. It costs a certain amount of money to hold inventory. You're like, oh, how does it cost me money? Well, I need the space. I need the heat, the heating, the cooling, the lighting. I need the person that moves it around and touches it and reorganizes it and receives it and those type of things. So all of these things are operating costs that get hidden. The less inventory you have, the less of that you need to incorporate into your operating cost. All right, so let's talk about this, right? So today is all about inventory. First of all, let's calculate the inventory turnover ratio, right? So there's two different ways of looking at inventory from a numeric standpoint. One is the turnover ratio, which is how many times do I replace this per year? The other is the notion of how many days worth of inventory do I have? And they're both the same. They're saying the same thing. They're just saying it differently, right? One saying it in Spanish, one saying it in French. But basically what it is that inventory turnover is how many times am I replacing it? And inventory days is how often am I replacing it, right? How long does it sit on the shelf? So let's calculate that. Let's pretend that I have 90 days worth of inventory. You're like, going, was that enough? Is it good? Remember, this is the result. And ratios don't mean anything unless you compare them to something else. That's what you have to learn first, is that whatever the calculation is, any of the ratios that you're doing for your clients, whatever that number is, it doesn't mean anything until you compare it to something else, either your goals or the industry average, or maybe something the banker or an investor is telling you have to meet. In this case, this company has 90 days worth of inventory and the industry average is 66. Is that good, fair, or terrible? Now, in my course, that's how I teach people to look at these: good, fair, or terrible. And in the app that I built, the Clear Path to Cash app, that's how we grade things: good, fair, and terrible. So what do you think? Put it in chat. Is that good, fair, or terrible? We got 90 days worth of inventory, and everybody else has got 66. Are we better than the average, or are we worse? Anybody? Worse, terrible, charitable, worse. Yeah, we have too much inventory, right? It's basically what it's saying, is that we've got too much. Here's why it's too much, is that based on somebody's sales value, when you compare yourself to the industry average, based on that, you only need 66 days worth to keep up with the sales value, right? That's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to match the demand of people coming in and buying it. So that's what this means, is I have enough to keep up with demand. This means I have too much. I have more than I need to keep up with demand. So good, fair, or terrible. Now, when I change that to turnover rate, all I do is take 365 and divide it by 90. So 365 and divided by 90, which is the 90 days, that equals 4.06, which is 4 times a year. Now that makes sense, right? Every quarter, 4 times a year. So that's basically what it's saying. That's what I'm saying. They say the same things. Well, here's how we got there, right? Here's the calculation for inventory days. So you got how much inventory do you have, and you divide it by cost of goods sold. Remember, inventory sits on the shelf. It's an asset. As soon as somebody buys it, it becomes the expensive cost of goods sold. Then we multiply it by 365 to convert it to days. Then we take 365 and divide it by 90, the result, to get the turnover rate. If I know the turnover rate, I can convert it to days by taking 365 and divided by 4.06, should equal 90 days. So it's always 365 divided by one or the other. It just says it a different way. Most clients understand days. They don't understand turnover rate as much. Now, the reason why you have to do turnover rate is that most calculations that I do, like Mining Your Business for Hidden Cash or the Fast Money Formula, it doesn't calculate the days. It calculates up the turnover rate, right? And it uses that in the mathematical formula. All right, so here's where this is important. The financial gap solution. Now, I teach the financial gap, and if you know anything about the financial gap, the smaller the gap, the less money it takes to run your business. So everything we do is to reduce the financial gap. Here's what the financial gap is. It is the amount of time where you theoretically do not have any money. You're waiting for money to come in while you're still paying, or you've already paid all your bills. So here's how it kind of looks. Inventory sits on the shelf for a certain number of days, right? And then at the same time, I'm paying my bills, which is probably the vendor's invoice. The difference between those two is called the financial gap, right? The difference between those two is the financial gap. So what we want to know is, I'm waiting for money to come in, and which is right here. Money comes in after I sell it, but I've already made my payment, right? That's what's basically we're saying, is that money's already left and I'm still waiting for money to come in. Some business owners will say, it just feels clunky. Like I'm always waiting for something to happen before I can do something else. That's generally because the financial gap got too large. Now, financial gap is what your working capital is supposed to cover. this amount of time. When people look at, do you have any working capital or what's your working capital? Well, that's what this means. Do I have enough money to cover this amount of time? This is one of the calculations of the way that bankers use to determine how much you need on a line of credit using the financial gap calculation. All right, let me go back here. So one way to make the gap smaller is to reduce the amount of inventory that you have, or stretch the length of time that you pay. Now, what I always say is that keep the accounts payable, keep accounts receivable around the industry average. Why? Because it's a lever that you have to pull when you get into a cash flow problem. Meaning that if I'm around the industry average, I don't get in trouble with my vendors. I can, they already expect it. Everybody else pays in 34 days. So does Mike. Well, if I'm paying in 56 days, I'm kind of somebody that sticks out. Oh, I always got to chase him around for money. I always got to call him. I always got to send him an email. I might be getting worse pricing. I might be getting missing out on discounts, those type of things. Well, that's why I say keep it at the industry average, because you kind of blend in. And if you have to on occasion, you can sit on an invoice for an extra week or two without sticking out and hurting your reputation or relationship with your vendor. All right, so we want that to be smaller. That's the way that you make the gap smaller. When people say this is one way to improve cash flow, this is why it works. This is the math behind it. All right, so here's what happens. How does reducing inventory actually work, right? How does it work? Well, one, you're actually going to get the sales, right? The money coming off the sale of the inventory. And then two, you're not going to take money out of the business to replace it, right? Because normally here's how it goes. We buy some inventory, we put it on the shelf. And when we put it on the shelf, it sits there for a certain amount of time. Finally, somebody buys it. And when they buy it, I get the money, or if I sell it to them on credit, I give them an invoice, and then that invoice goes and sits on their desk for a certain amount of time. And then I finally get the money. But so I buy it, I sell it, then I replace it. That's the normal course of action. And I'll tell you what, I've seen business owners do it. They'll go into the warehouse and go, give me 5 of these, give me 4 of those, give me 25 of these, give me 13 of those. And they're guessing. They're using their gut. They're just saying, I think I paid, I spent, or we sold 10 of these last week. Let's just get 10 more and put them back on the shelf. That's the absolute wrong way to control your inventory, is by doing it by gut, or taking a sales report from the previous week saying we sold 10, so we rebuy 10, right? Because that's kind of what happens. So we're going to watch this happen in real time, right? Cash in versus cash out, and then how many units did we sell? So if we sell, we spend $100,000 to buy 100 units, that's $100,000 out of the bank account. And then some customers come in and buy it, and maybe we get $50,000 in on 50 units. Now you're like, oh, wait a second, Mike, that's no markup there. That's the same price. I know, but I'm going cash in to cash out on inventory. You're going to have a little extra money to run your business. You got to remember, you have to pay buy the inventory first. Whatever is left is what you run your business with and put in your pocket. Remember, it's the gross profit. This is the cost of goods sold side. The gross profit is the only place that you can get cash to pay your expenses and put in your pocket, right? So $100,000 out, $50,000 comes back in for the inventory, and we're down 50 units. That means I'm going to go out and just replace it. Oh, I sold 50, so I'm going to buy 50. Well, look what happens here. I spend 100,000, 50 comes in, then I take the same 50 and rebuy it. That net change is zero. I still got 100 units, and on cash didn't change. It's still the same. Nothing happened. But what if I ran the inventory down? What if I just lowered the amount that I'm carrying? Well, I'd still buy and stock the shelves. I'd still have customers buy it, right? So these don't change. Still bought 100,000 for 100 units. Customers still bought 50,000 for 50 units, but I didn't rebuy. Well, look what happens. This stays in my company. I keep $50,000 in the company, and maybe I'm down 50 units, but that's me reducing inventory to put $50,000 back in the company. And it happens instantly. If you've got a client that has a cash flow problem and needs cash now, this is the exercise you should be doing if they have inventory, is figuring out how much should they have and running every SKU down to the right level. Well, how does that work? How do I know which ones to reduce? Well, in my program, I give you a inventory master spreadsheet that does a lot of the calculation for you and says you should have X number, right? You should have this in Amber Bach or this in Bacardi. This is how many you should have based on a calculation that's called PAR, periodic automatic reordering, right? Or automatic replacement. And here's the calculation. It's the average number sold per month divided by number of deliveries per month, right? So it's the average number of each SKU, right? You do this for every single SKU, the average number sold per month divided by the number of times I can get it per month, right? Because month to month, we're trying to stay consistent in the time frame. But then you got this extra thing, safety amount. If you have a really strong owner, chances are they don't need that safety amount. I'll tell you what that safety amount is. That's somebody that's scared, right? That's somebody that's scared because whatever this calculation turns out to be, that's the right number. The safety amount is what makes the owner feel comfortable until he trusts the math. Or the safety amount, you know something's coming up in the next order cycle, which is, Super Bowl's coming up, or Cinco de Mayo, or St. Patrick's Day. Maybe I should have more Budweiser. Maybe I should have more of a certain item. So that safety amount is kind of your buffer that you manipulate all year long based on the seasonality of a unit. All right. So it has to start here. This is the hardest thing. When you tell somebody they got to go count, they don't want to do it. Right? So they don't want to do it. So this is where I use a technique that I teach in the book called the economic echo. And the economic echo is telling them or connecting the financial impact, which means every action you take is going to come back to you in the form of dollars. That's the economic echo, meaning, hey, when you go count this warehouse, the last time I had somebody count the warehouse, Don up in Kansas City, he thought he had about $50,000 worth of goods out in his warehouse. We went and counted. There was $175,000 worth of goods out there, right? $125,000 that he had already paid at Home Depot and other places and put into his warehouse that his teams weren't using. They just kept rebuying at Home Depot. All we did was force the workers to take from the warehouse first before they went to Home Depot. One change, but we didn't know the difference was on the shelf until we actually counted it. Now, the economic echo is just that. I tell my client that story. Hey, I had a client that we found $125,000 that he put into his bank account in 3 months. Why? Because they were pulling from there first down to the right level before they went and rebought at Home Depot. And we put it in his pocket. Why? Because he'd already spent the money. It was already gone. It was already sitting on the shelf. And we're talking about things like rebar and concrete and these pillars and little connectors, things that don't go bad, right? They get built into construction. So that's a way to put more cash back in your pocket pretty fast. Then I want you to compare that physical inventory to the par level that you calculate, right? So let's calculate one, right? In the bar business, let's just say that I bought 200 cases of Budweiser or sold 200 cases of Budweiser per month. And I could get it every week. So I could get it 4 times a month. That means 200 divided by 4, I should have 50, right? At the beginning of the ordering cycle, and for Budweiser, they would come in on Mondays, take my order. It was delivered on Wednesday. And then if it was Super Bowl, maybe I would add 10 cases because it's Super Bowl. That's my safety amount. Well, that means par here, we'll say, is 50. All right, par would be 50. So if I go in and count it on Monday and I had 60 cases of Budweiser, I'm not going to order. I'm going to wait until it comes down. Or if I only had 30, I'm going to order back to 50, or I'm going to add 20. I guess that's a bad example because of the safety amount. This might be 80. I would order back or reduce it back to 60. But that's what you're doing. You're just creating a par saying, I only need this much to keep up with my sales. If I'm over, I don't order. If I'm under, I only order to this level. And by doing that, you're going to be active in managing your inventory and keeping the right amount of stuff on the shelf so you don't run out. Nobody wants to run out because you miss out on sales. But you're not buying too much where it just sits there for too long. So that's using the PAR calculation. Then you need to actively monitor it, right? And so that's what I built inside, the app ClearPath to Cash is a way for them to manage the goal. When you set this and your shortage is solved, this is managing the financial gap, and you've solved the shortage by having the right amount of inventory. In this case, not 91, but 61. It's going to tell you, Cassie, I think it is. I think Insightful Accountant does have this on recording that you can go back and watch. This is going to tell you the number from your balance sheet you should be looking at. So that's what I do is I try to tell my clients saying, listen, you should only have $900,000 or $978,000 in inventory. Every time it gets over that, you have to run it back down. You have to come back and actively monitor it down because we get loose. We just get busy in our day-to-day, and sometimes the inventory levels start to rack up. Well, I teach them how to know and use the balance sheet so they never have too much, or they know when they could be getting in trouble by using that. And the inventory value here is the cost of goods sold divided by 365 times the inventory days. That tells you how much you should have on the shelf. All right, so I mentioned carrying cost, right? These are the hidden costs, the things that it takes just for having it. When you reduce inventory, you indirectly reduce your inventory carrying cost, right? And sometimes just to know that a rough estimate is about 20% of your inventory is hidden in operating costs. So if I have $100,000 in inventory, chances are I have about $20,000 in per year in hidden carrying cost. Here's how you calculate them. You got the holding cost. That's a little bit harder. That's why I use the rough estimate. Like, what does it really cost? Maybe I've got extra square foot rent, or I've got extra heating and cooling and things like that. You've got to try to figure out how much extra does it cost just by having that space, and how much time does do your employees take to manage and touch and move and receive and order and all those type of things. Divide that by the value of your inventory, multiply by 100, and that tells you what your carrying costs are, right? That's basically what it's going to tell you. But I just use 20% of inventories hidden in the operating costs because that gets my juices flowing. So that's probably the good estimate is 20%. So you want to learn more? We're coming up on 10:30 is usually when we get these done. That's why we don't give CPE credit. But I've got a free course. I used to just give out the ebook for the 7-minute conversation. But now if you go to my website, I give out the whole video lesson. So it's another hour just on calculations that I teach in the 7-minute conversation. Plus you get a worksheet that goes with it to help you interpret these results. You can go there and get that now. I do have a Facebook group that I do a lot of different teachings and lives and event invitations and resources I give out. I have a podcast. It's called Mike and Blaine, Business, Beer, and BS, where we tell stories about business, to help you really build your repertoire of stories up so you can go out there and work with your clients. And if you need anything about me or my offers, what I do, what I teach, the app, the courses, the live coaching, just email me at mike@cashflowmike.com. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate you. This is one of my favorite things to do. I pretty much begged Gary to let me do it. So thank you very much. Hope it helped.